Hello everyone, Bladen Breitreiter, Incident Meteorologist, here with Cameo, Sign Language Interpreter, to give you a weather update for the Calf Canyon fire for Tuesday, August 9th. So, what's going on out there? We got a lot of high pressure going on out there. Now, if you're familiar with monsoon season in New Mexico, you're very familiar with what we call the Four Corners High. And what it basically is upper level high pressure that tends to situate itself right over the Four Corners region here and persist for a couple months. Right now, what we've had is we've seen this guy kind of shimmy over across New Mexico, take a brief tour to the Great Plains, kind of change his mind, reach his hand back, elongate, and then finally give up. And now that high pressure is starting to reform here across the Four Corners. Its center is actually up here in southern Colorado today, and you can tell that by the fact that we have this kind of rotating deck of clouds. This pink actually kind of shows you that it is clouds at the mid-level, which is a great place for us to look to find this particular system. And so we can see that it's trying to curl around and it's starting to change directions and go up as we get a little bit closer into that kind of southwest tip of Colorado there. So high pressure systems spin in a clockwise motion, and that's what we're seeing here on this simple water vapor imagery. And I use this imagery a lot. This is basically a composite. It allows me to see that I have water vapor down in the lower levels, the mid levels, and the upper levels, and it does that by differentiating the colors here so that I don't have to look at several different images to kind of get an idea of what's going on. So it's real cool in the fact that we can see some of the convection here. It shows up as sort of a white color, and kind of some of this milky pink is the clouds at mid-levels there. As we get a little bit closer to the high pressure, towards the center, there's a lot of sinking air. And so that's being kind of differentiated by a swath of green, which implies that there is dry air aloft, but nothing necessarily down below. So super dry below, a little bit of moisture at the upper levels, and then absolutely nothing below due to that sinking air. So how does the monsoon work? It's really important to kind of get an idea of how this affects our day-to-day lives, and it's really interesting how it actually has played out into the scenario that we do have here. So in the spring, across the desert Southwest, we actually see very dry westerly winds. So that will be wind moving from west to east. And that's what we saw predominantly through the months of April and May, and what kind of set us up into the situation that we have here with the Calf Canyon and Hermit's Peak fire. As we get a little bit closer to the summer months and things start to heat up, that wind direction is going to change from being westerly to being more southerly or southeasterly. And the main thing that drives that actually is temperature. So the desert Southwest compared to the rest of the continental United States is a lot hotter. And so air down in Old Mexico, particularly across the Chihuahuan and the Sonoran deserts, is basically just trying to escape. It gets really hot down there, and it wants to come up to a little bit more favorable temperatures that we see here across New Mexico and across Arizona. And what that helps to do is also drive some moisture in. So we get what's called a monsoonal plume. And so it might be a little hard to see on here, but a lot of it, as this is moving over, we're seeing the plume shift a little bit across Arizona there. So for today, actually a lot of the favored areas to be seeing thunderstorm development is going to be across this area here, not so much for us. What the high pressure also does is it helps to dictate where those storms are going to go. Something to consider high pressure, as far as how strong the winds are up at this portion of the atmosphere, high pressure would tend for that to be a lot weaker. So we call that very weakened flow aloft. That is why these thunderstorms don't particularly want to get going and move and, take care of business. They tend to meander and kind of change paths and not necessarily know where they're going. So as we go into the day, what we have been seeing almost consistently every day is them setting up over the high terrain and just hanging out and dropping a bunch of rain and dropping more rain. That's what's helping to create this incredible flash flood threat. Now, as we go in through the day today, they're still going to try to form over the high terrain here, but instead of kind of back building out and increasing in coverage across the fire area, the storms that form over here will more likely start to push off and go a little bit to the west. That means that when we're looking for what we need to warn crews about, we're going to actually be looking a little bit further out to our east. So stuff across the east slopes and the highlands, anything that forms out here will have the potential to move into the fire area today. Now, again, kind of like I said, they're going to be slow. They're going to meander. They're literally like storms walking through Walmart. They don't know what they need. They don't know where they're going. They're just kind of wandering about, dropping a lot of rain. Now, when you drop a lot of rain over a burn scar, things are a lot different than if you were to drop a lot of rain over, say, an area out here that hasn't been scorched by fire. What happens is that soil almost changes at a chemical level so that it doesn't necessarily filter in and drain like it should. So the water ends up sitting on top and then running downhill. As it's doing that, it's collecting that sediment, that ash, that soot, all the different pieces of, snag trees that have been falling in the way. It's getting all of that, and then as it's going, it's picking up momentum, and it's coming down the hill. So there's a big difference between the flash flood that you would probably see, in Albuquerque versus the flash flood that you might see in Rosiada. The other thing to consider is that, we see this stuff going across roads. So the roads wash out. But what we seldom talk about is the fact that when those roads wash out, there is underlying damage to the bed of that road that is caused by the water. So it's not structurally as sound as it would have been before this happened. So any weight that's put across that road could cause it to collapse. So there are a lot of different factors about flash flooding in burn scars that you have to consider differently than you would any other place in the region. So today, same sort of deal, right? We still have those daily rounds, those afternoon thunderstorms that we'll see again today. They're going to form in generally the same place, but also perhaps out here. It's also localized and distant rainfall. So even though I'm saying, oh, hey, this stuff is going to be the stuff that moves in, the stuff that forms over here is still a threat. If it forms over here, back builds a little just into this area here, into any of these, especially these moderate to high burn severity areas, that's still going to be a risk for flash flooding as we go into the day. Also, we've had continued bouts every day of rainfall. So every day that we have that and every day that these cells favor those areas, that means that our thresholds for that flooding are going to be lower. So it's just something to keep in mind today as you're going about your business and as you start to see, towering cumulus clouds off in the distance, to just be very, very aware that what's happening out there today, even though it's very, very far away, could have pretty potent downstream effects. Do not cross flooded roadways. You don't know how deep that water is. You don't know how stable the roadbed is anymore. And also, debris flow water is a lot thicker. If it's running fast, it'll sweep your car right off its feet, and that's not what you want. So be very, very careful today. We'll start to see storms firing here as we get into the afternoon. Be very aware of any flash flood warnings that are put out by the National Weather Service. Check your kits, check your escape routes, and just do your best to remain safe out there as we continue this historic monsoon season. Thank you guys so much.